Excellent,
progress.
thank you.
So just before we dive into today's topic, some of our previous webinars have been, for example, on the disputes in the metaverse, NFTs, the application of technology to e-discovery, and all of these you can access on our website. So do not hesitate to have a look. And now to Sophie, who will talk more about today's webinar and some housekeeping matters.
Thank you very much. As you saw, we started recording so that you're aware. This webinar is on the topic of decentralized autonomous organizations, DAOs for short. We are going to find out what they are, why they matter, because they have become a pillar of the online digital economy. What is it about them that should speak to lawyers? And at the moment, they are an alegal, i.e. outside of a legal structure in many jurisdictions, if not most of them. And that raises a lot of very interesting questions. We are scheduled to finish in an hour. We have our three amazing speakers that Ellie will be introducing in a minute. It will be in the order of Federico Ast, Milagros Santamaria, and then Sabine Lepic, who will be speaking. Each speaker will speak between 15, 18 minutes, and then we have questions at the end. And just before we go to questions, we are going to have also an intervention from the floor from Andre Cardozo on the question of blockchain governance and how DAOs can assist. Hi, Andre. Federico Ast will be speaking about how DAOs are built, what they are, how you make them happen. Milagros Santamaria will be talking about the legal wrappers that go around DAOs and when it's appropriate and how you make them. Sabine will be talking to us about a proposed model law for DAOs to give them a legal personality, and it is a model law that is a fantastic step forward, but is not without its critics, and we can't wait to hear about that. So I'm going to put myself on mute and let Ellie introduce our first speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie. So first, as you heard, we will have Federico Ast, who will talk to us about how to build a DAO. Just a few words on Federico, who has a very impressive profile, as most of you probably know. He graduated in economics and philosophy from the University of Buenos Aires, and he holds a Ph.D. in management from IAE Business School. He is the founder and CEO of Kleros, which is a legal tech company using game theory and blockchain technology in arbitration. As a pioneer in the field of decentralized justice, he has lectured in universities such as Stanford, Oxford, and Columbia, and in international organizations such as the United Nations. He is an alumni at the Singularity University and hosts the first Coursera courses about blockchain and legal tech in Spanish. He is passionate about exponential technologies such as artificial intelligence, crowdsourcing, and blockchain for social innovation. And maybe, Federico, you could start with a few words on why DAOs are so important right now and what they are. And the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, and it's great to see in the audience so many good friends. Let me take you back a bit into the 1990s, before anyone would speak about DAOs, because this is where it starts. In the 1990s, you have this paper called Smart Contract, published by Nick Szabo, cryptographer and legal scholar, and he makes this interesting comment about how the economy is going to a more digital e-commerce, virtual reality, and still the ideas that we have for making human agreements are based on 15th century technologies like, well, as you know, paper contracts. So he sees a growing, bottleneck between this digital economy to which we're going very fast and these very old, obsolete legal systems. And so he proposes an idea called smart contracts, where it's like a digital agreement that two parties can make. And the example he uses in this paper is like Alice and Bob. Alice has a car, she wants to sell this to Bob, and they agree with a smart contract that he will make payments in installments. So he goes, makes the first payment, takes the car, go with his wife to visit somewhere, and then at some point he stops paying the installments and his key stops working, and Alice's key gets again enabled, so she goes and picks her car, and this is done at a near zero cost compared to the high cost of legal systems. And the thing about smart contracts is this idea of having an agreement that has the enforcement inserted within the agreement, okay? And this enforcement is done at a very low cost compared to legal systems, and almost immediately, right? So this was from the 90s, this idea of smart contracts. So time passes, and then we have the financial crisis, and in that context, as you know, we have the paper of Bitcoin by Satoshi Nakamoto, and some years later, in 2014, we have the launch of this project called Ethereum, which is, as you know, blockchain like Bitcoins, but with the difference that the language on which it's written enables anyone to write smart contracts on Ethereum and deploy them on this decentralized network. Almost everything that you could express under the form of if X then Y, then in principle you can put that into a smart contract. Typical example is flight insurance. If the flight gets to destination later than 20 minutes, then the passenger gets a reimbursement of, 20% of the value. And this happens without going to the customer service, without going to the regulator, without going to a lawyer, without anything. As when this happens, automatically the consequence happens, so the reimbursement is done immediately. So what happens if we put one smart contract after the other? Then we can start building stuff like logic with if X, then Y, then Z, then whatever. And this is what we call a decentralized application, a digital bureaucracy which executes a predefined code in a decentralized network. And this is basically what a DAO is. So it is this decentralized organization that works, following a set of rules that are encoded in some code based on Ethereum or any other public blockchain. And this will produce a bureaucracy that is going to work exactly as it's coded. So the first large-scale experiment with a DAO was actually called the DAO, and it was launched in 2016. It was an investment fund built on Ethereum where people could put some money into this pool, and then in return they would receive tokens that gave them the right to vote into which projects this common investment fund would support, right? So you put Ether into the pool, you get tokens, and these tokens gives you the right to vote on what project to support. 11,000 people participated in this experiment, and they raised $170 million. In a time where Ether was really, I think it was not even $50. So it was a huge amount of money. And this showed us how this kind of digital cooperative of investment fund could replace the traditional logic of a VC fund, where you have a bunch of VCs who are general partners and they get money and they decide where to invest. So in this case, these general partners were disintermediated by the community. Everyone was able to vote on who to support, and not just a bunch of VCs who were the owners of the fund. So this was the first idea we had. Okay, how can a DAO disintermediate a very traditional industry like venture capital? This experiment didn't end well because there was a hack and everything. They had to go back with everything and reimburse people. It didn't end well, but it was a first experiment which gave us the idea of how a DAO could work. So first thing you need to remember is that a DAO is a digital cooperative built on blockchain technology, mostly on Ethereum. And then we had a bunch of other experiments. One of them, who was very important, was created by this woman you see on the screen, Imogen Heap. She wanted to create like a DAO for having artists receive more of the, earn more money than what they used to earn with YouTube, for example, or Spotify. So this was called Ujo Music, and it used a smart contract for people to buy music, and then after people bought the songs from this platform, so the musicians were paid the royalties automatically through smart contracts, and everything was organized through like a DAO. So people who were part of the platform could vote what were the royalties to be paid. I mean, how the platform would be updated. So there was all this logic of decision making, that is collective decision making. And this was a very early experiment that also didn't end very well, because it was also very early stage. This started, I think, also in 2017. And now we are seeing like a DAOs blossoming in lots of different elements. So all of what you think of Web3 is basically, or most of it is built as DAO. So Mirror is like Medium, but decentralized, with a DAO, with people voting how the platform should be run. All of these DeFi platforms of, like Uniswap Exchange, MakerDAO, Aave, all of these platforms are owned by users who decide, in the case of Aave, how much, should be the interest rate, how should be defined the collaterals for the tokens. So all of these different discussions are done as a community with a voting and governance mechanism with a DAO form. This is the ecosystem of DAOs in the field of decentralized insurance. So we are having lots of DAOs in different elements, resolving different aspects. So what this is bringing us now is we are starting to see the very important governance dilemmas, right? So in the traditional world of Web 2, the traditional internet, it was very easy. You have a company, you have an owner, or a board, and they do whatever they want. It's like if you want to have a metaphor of the analog world, it was a monarchy, where a monarch makes the decisions. He thinks it's better for the users and for everyone, and there's no discussion at all. But the problem is that when you build a DAO, then you have to start agreeing with lots of people about how this should work, and you should start voting. It's kind of, we're in the moment where the federalists in the US were trying to figure out how you make a state work as a democracy, like in the US, when you don't have a king anymore. And we are trying to learn. And one of the big questions that are arising is, how do you resolve disputes happening between members of the DAO? You don't have an owner who can, kick people out or decide how to do the arbitration. I don't know if you have heard of a project called Kleros, which basically is potentially a very important element that is going to resolve lots of disputes about happening in DAOs of all different kinds. I've discussed Kleros many times in this community. I'm not going to insist more on this, and you have lots of videos of me presenting Kleros, but this is a bit the role that Kleros can play within the Web3 ecosystem. I want to insist more today into how rules are made, because this is where the problems are arising now. The way in which DAOs were traditionally organized were with that like corporate governance type of scheme, where you have like one token gives you the right to have one vote, and then it's like a share in a company, right? And there are different schemes where you can like delegate your vote to people who are experts in some topics, and then you can take the vote back if they don't do their job as you expect them. So this is one of the experiments we are having, and this is a platform that people use very often for making the votes for in DAOs context. It's called Snapshot, and then you log with your wallet there, and then you have in that wallet, 1 million tokens, and then you can vote with that voting power on the proposal that is at hand. So you have this situation, but people say that this type of one token, one vote is kind of plutocratic, because it gives people with more money more voting power, and some people think this is not fair. So they propose doing one person, one vote schemes for governing DAOs. And this is not easy, because what happens is that if you have one person, one vote, what if I start having many accounts? I make fake accounts to have like fake votes, and then I start turning the election in my favor because I'm attacking the system in this way. So we developed at Kleros a project called Proof of Humanity that is a list of users that only give each user one address per person. So it makes sure that there are no duplicates And this is an important tool for the future of DAOs and for having the certainty that you are going to have only one person doing one vote and not, having civil attackers, faking accounts to get more voting power, right? And this is what it looks like, an implementation of one person, one vote scheme with vote delegation. So you see some users have like a high amount of votes on the right. You see the amount of voting power. That voting power doesn't come from the fact of having more tokens. It comes from the fact that other people delegated their votes to them. And this is how they, have this voting power. And this is also, you see in Snapshot, which is a tool that we use for this voting, okay? So one of the main topics currently about DAOs is about governance, about this, this kind of tension between this idea of corporate governance and one token, one vote, which of course gives people more skin in the game in decisions that are being made because they have more money at stake and they want decisions to be done in a good way, versus this other approach, of nation state type of governance and one person, one vote, which of course it's more inclusive in some sense, but also can have problems that people who vote, they don't really have that much skin in the game, and that can lead to, bad outcomes for the DAO, okay? And one thing about DAOs is they are places full of politics and full of dramas. MakerDAO, which is the DAO that runs the most important stablecoin in the world, algorithmic stablecoin, it's a very big mess of interest and people, arguing. Another case of like very big, DAO with lots of governance problems is Proof of Humanity. The DAO that is organizing the list for humans to vote in a one person, one vote also is internally, a big, politics mess. So MakerDAO, Proof of Humanity. So we are at this point like trying to figure out what is the best way to govern this new type of institutions. And yeah, we don't really know very well how to do it. I think nobody knows. One use case of Kleros I just want to mention, because we don't typically speak about Kleros in this context. It's like a Supreme Court for DAOs. Let's say you have a majority of voters who are trying, like, crushing the minority because they have more voting power, but they want to put some rule or they want to make some decision that is in egregious contradiction to what the DAO constitution is or the core beliefs of the community. You could have like Kleros, overturn decisions done in this way, as you would expect from a Supreme Court in traditional democracies, or I think in France they call it Conseil Constitutionnel or something like that. So you have this use of Kleros that we don't typically, pitch in context of arbitrators, but this is a very important tool for DAOs. So this is a short introduction. So do you get to know what a DAO is, how it works, and what are the challenges now? I'm not going to get into the legal status of DAO because I know Millie and Sabine are going to get into this now. What are the general partnerships, LLCs? Who knows? I will let you just get into that. I'm just going to finalize by recommending two excellent texts that you might want to check if you want to learn about DAOs. One is Jesse Walden's article on past, present, future from co-ops to crypto networks, which puts DAOs in the context of, this is a new version of cooperatives. Cooperatives have been a very popular way to organize economic activity for a long time. And, DAOs and crypto networks are basically a new version of this with the same, pros and cons that traditional cooperatives used to have. And then there is a very similar, topic addressed by Vitalik Buterin, very recent, like 1 month ago, where he, addresses this problem of corporate governance versus like a nation state democratic governance. And this is a really interesting article for all of you that you are starting to work in this area. So thank you very much. Hope that gave you a bit of overview of what DAOs are and how this works. And yeah, I will continue to the next speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Federico. That was very interesting. I don't know, Sophie, I saw you unmute. I don't know if you had a question.
I saw the article by Vitalik, so that's why I came up. But thank you, Fede. That's, as always, an extremely... We now know why Fede is one of the top lecturers on Coursera. and a very
Absolutely.
an excellent communicator of what these things are and how they matter. I'm going to let Ellie introduce Millie. I have questions for Fede, but I'm keeping them for the Q&A. Please go ahead, Ellie.
Perfect. So our second speaker of today is Milagros Santamaria, who will explore the questions of DAO legal wrappers and when and why they are needed, as Federico touched upon briefly. Millie is the COO of the EMEA region of Tokenize-IT, which is an end-to-end firm devoted to the provision of legal fintech solutions on Web3 for companies, governments, and NGOs. She is a private corporate lawyer specialized in new technologies with a master's in business law from Aden International Business School. She's an ex-member of the international arbitration team of Universidad de Mendoza, invited professor at the Austral University and IAE Business School, and she is also a tutor at Aden International Business School. She's also an alumna of Oxford's blockchain strategy program and an author of multiple articles and publications at Thomson Reuters, Argentina. Recently, and possibly some of you have seen this, she was a speaker at the Ethereum Community Conference, the ETHCC 2022 in Paris, where she spoke on DAO legal frameworks, and then she addressed the same subject at the WOW Summit Lisbon 2022. And she is a young professional passionate about the possibilities to create the jump from Web 2 to Web 3. Welcome, Millie. It's very exciting to have you with us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Ellie, as well as Sophie, for having me. It's very good to be with Federico again and Sabine after meeting all of you again in Paris. And I'm very excited about joining everyone, of course, especially after seeing a Proof of Humanity screenshot that Federico took with the Argentinian nanny named Cookie. That was actually part of it. That was amazing. Also because I'm Argentinian, so there was a little bit true to my heart. And I think that after this great introduction that Federico gave us of what is a DAO and how to actually work from a less technical to a more technical understanding, is that now that we understand to an extent what they are and how they work, is that we start wondering, when does a DAO actually need a legal wrapper? There's a very interesting debate that continues on what actually is a DAO, making a very big emphasis on decentralization and being autonomous or not. But speaking more general of it, is that to the moment that we have a decentralized autonomous organization without judging the level of decentralization it might have, or that we account to seat of the DAO for the operation or actually the execution of off-chain operations. If we have a DAO that has this need for the execution of off-chain operations, like, for example, opening a bank account, signing contracts, interacting with people or entities of the meet space, to call it meet space, not to open different debate on real world and virtual world when both of them can coexist and actually both be real. And other off-chain operations, as for example, declaring and paying taxes. When we see a DAO that has these needs, this off-chain operation execution needs, is that the thought or the possibility of considering a legal wrapper arises. But this is only the first thing to bear into account. So first of all, it would be the necessity of execution of off-chain operation. And then a second one that's very important, especially for what's happening nowadays in the US with the CFTC, with the first class action to a DAO, is limited liability for members. Why? Because founders as well as members of a DAO want to know that they don't actually have joint responsibility for any kind of trouble that the DAO itself might have, or on the consequences of the DAO's action and themselves. So the DAO can actually, as an entity or as a legal wrapper in this case, be the one that actually takes on the liability and know each member or having any member joint responsibility to whatever is happening. So to these first two questions that a DAO can ask, or the core member may ask themselves at the moment of planning or making the roadmap for their own project or DAO, is, okay, now we understand that we might need the execution of off-chain operations as well to maybe be legally compliant with different kind of regulations on crypto that, or blockchain or virtual asset service provider activities that we will mention in the end, but also for the tranquility of having limited liability for members, and also having investors feel calmer at the moment of working with the DAO themselves beyond the users, is that we get to make a little bit of a more thorough analysis. That is when the DAO itself, or actually the founding of the members, ask, what is the purpose of the DAO? Because depending on the fact that the activity of the DAO itself is going to be a for-profit or a non-profit, is the kind of legal entity that might help us better adjust it or adapt it. And taking this little step to make a small comment on the fact that there's nowhere that actually says, or there's also very little doctrine on the matter, that if a DAO finds the legal wrapper, sees itself in the need of a legal wrapper, it should be fully wrapped in only one entity. There's also the possibility of having, okay, one entity as a full wrapper of a DAO, or a DAO itself could have, for example, only wrapped or legally wrapped its treasury and have an unincorporated protocol to the side, or actually utilize different kind of entities as of a siloed structure and umbrella for different operations or activities being set up in different entities. This can be arranged in different ways to even optimize the way they work. So making this little comment is that one of the first things, therefore, that we ask ourselves after the first two questions is the purpose, whether it's for-profit, non-profit, and in case of having a DAO that's actually for-profit, if we're going to have the need for distribution, member distribution for the members of the DAO themselves, or whatever they might be able to create. And just to also mention the other aspects to bear into account is that even though we live in blockchain, to call it like that, or the whole ecosystem of Web3 is a very globalized environment, is that we still need to understand what is the nationality of the founders, as well of the members and the users that we're going to have, where the control, at least at the beginning of the DAO, is going to come from, bearing into account how and when the deployment of the tokens are going to happen, and the trade of business. Why? Because to give you an example, if we realize that we're trying to find a legal wrapper for a DAO out in a jurisdiction that, for example, it's outside of the US, but we realize that DAO members, most of them, as well as users, are actually in the US, as well as the control and the trade of business. If we actually do this, we might face potential problems with the SEC, with the CFTC, with the IRS. So there's this checklist to consider at the moment of understanding why would we actually need this DAO, and how to legally find a legal wrapper that is compliant with the different jurisdictions that the DAO and its activity, as well as its tokens, are going to interact with. And the interesting debate with this matter is, and comes specifically with the words decentralized and autonomous, because some say, and it's a very rich discussion, that actually finding a legal wrapper to a DAO is something that could centralize things to a single point of failure, and therefore forcing members or founding members to actually have to sacrifice that, or to an extent we have to see what kind of entity this that has to do with the decentralization they might have, or how autonomous they can be, as well as how anonym or pseudonym they can have. So sacrificing to an extent decentralization and pseudonymity. I'd like to also work and explain an example. So all the information that I know, it can be a lot of information, doesn't fall down immediately. So going back a little bit, if we have a DAO or a group of people that want to create a DAO, they ask themselves, do we need a legal wrapper? Well, I might need to execute off-chain operations. Okay, and it would be important to have limited liability for members to avoid having legal issues in the future for them. Okay, what kind of purpose is it? For profit, non-profit? Do we want actually distribution for the members? And from then on, understand to what extent it's important to them, or how actually they are willing and to what extent to sacrifice this that has to do with decentralization and anonymity. Because for some, it might sound like an unpopular opinion, but some people actually just want on-chain governance at the different projects that they're trying to develop, which could then trigger the comment of, okay, then therefore that is not a DAO, that could be considered a DAC, a decentralized autonomous corporation, as it was before considered in different papers. And so far, and understanding the negative aspects that could arise from considering or having a legal wrapper, we have to also mention that it goes beyond of the sacrifices that we just mentioned, but also the potential ambiguity that might come from the legal documents that are drafted and the smart contracts that are actually being deployed and developed, as well as the costs that sometime, and depending on the entities that we're gonna choose, that we can therefore have. And there's this game that we used to play when we were kids called the floor is lava. I don't know if you guys remember it. I even played as a grown-up sometime with my nephews. And the fact that there's not enough regulatory certainty in most part of the world makes us think that some of the blocks or some of the entities that we might choose for the legal wrapping must or might make us feel safe right now. But the fact that things and regulation are developing quite fast could make a safe entity to this moment, or even ambiguous on a country jurisdiction that don't have enough regulation on the matter, turn things into the floor is lava pretty fast. And already having mentioned this different aspects to bear into account, is that I can give you an example of a non-profit entity that could be used. For example, if we're in the US and we have a non-profit DAO, and we consider, okay, the purpose is going to be non-profit, the type of DAO is going to be, it's a charity DAO. Therefore, we can consider this as the kind of entities that jurisdiction itself offers, considering that we have most of the members of the people that are going to interact with the protocols or the tokens, or actually the DAO itself to be from the US, to have one of the entities that are non-profit, like a private foundation, and make the most of the tax exemption that therefore you can apply and utilize the tax benefits of one of the reasons that could be helpful as well for the DAO to find the legal wrapper. So a DAO that's a philanthropic or charity DAO could therefore find a private foundation as one of its legal wrapper and have it apply for a tax exempt status of 501c3, and therefore provide with limited liability from the members and a very clear way of treating its own taxes. And I am about to run out of time, but the important thing that I want to mention is there are few jurisdictions in the world that give a direct, already existing regulation that gives an entity for the DAOs specifically to utilize as the legal wrapper. We can talk about Wyoming DAO LLCs. We can talk about Tennessee's decentralized organizations making a straight war at the word autonomous, because some consider actually not autonomous, most of that exist. We can talk about the Marshall Islands as well that have the DAO LLC Act. We can talk about Colorado cooperatives as well. And then we can also talk about the already existing entities that can be used and adapted to the needs of the DAO in sacrificing some of its main core elements as well. But what I find interesting and very passionate about this matter is that there's very little said and done on this, which opens up a whole bunch of opportunities on top of the table for young professionals and professionals of all kinds to actually help develop what is going to be not the future, but actually the regulations and the opportunities of the present, of how we're going to organize ourselves to leave the old and negative patterns of Web2 behind and enter into Web3 in a more organized and more equitable way altogether. So if I can give something out of this talk, is that if you have a DAO and you want to understand which kind of, if you need a legal wrapper or what kind of legal wrapper you should use, before looking out, start with looking inside on who you are, what you want to do, what is your mission, and from then on, what are the possible and current possibilities that you got. Understanding that beyond of the fact that you might need or not know right now what to do, there are different jurisdictions in the world doing their best to develop a positive and holistic framework so things can work out. And I think that was exactly 15 minutes, so we can all talk together. It was a lot of information in very little time. I'm sorry.
Thank you very
don't
much,
be sorry.
Millie.
I think that's
Oh, well.
fantastic. Well done.
Thank you.
That was excellent. All right, so I think again we will leave any questions you may have for the end, so bear with us, and we will get now even more specific with our third speaker of today, Sabine Lepic, who will dive into
Sorry, Ellie, sorry,
Yes.
I'm so sorry.
No,
I just wanted to say
go.
for the audience, if you have questions, just put them in the chat right now and we'll pick them up at the end. Don't wait until the end. So feel free. Sorry, Ellie, please go ahead.
No worries. So our last speaker of today, Sabine Lepic, who will dive into one of these specific frameworks, a recent initiative, the COALA model law for DAOs. So just to briefly introduce Sabine before we give her the floor, Sabine is a doctor of law, researcher, law professor, and lawyer specializing in contract law and its application to new technologies. As a qualified mediator and arbitrator, she prevents risks and finds the most appropriate ways to resolve these future disputes. She represented and advised many well-known Web3 and European crypto firms, mainly in France. In addition, she lectures at prestigious universities in France, Abu Dhabi, and Morocco, Assas, Sciences Po, and Sorbonne, and participates in numerous research groups. Her portfolio includes Industry 4.0, AdTech, RegTech, and alternative dispute resolution. Thank you so much, Sabine, for joining us today, and the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. So, Sophie, can you share the... Yes. So many thanks to ArbTech and Sophie for inviting me to share my expertise about DAO. Due to the growing obsession with DeFi and tiger governmental regulation of a cryptocurrency product, the DAO has emerged as a novel attraction. A DAO control and governance are distributed horizontally, which eliminates the need for a central authority. The desire of DeFi is to avoid government regulation, and regulating the DAO presents a unique issue of legal identity due to the lack of formal legal recognition, which implicates a serious question of liability for a DAO and its member. So the question is to be or not to be regulated. So regulated DAO, Wyoming tried to address the issue legal by enacting a law that is designed to allow DAO to fit within an LLC structure, which is intended to combat the concern of DAO members regarding liability under the current partnership principle. So if you look, Maverick DAO, the legal question will be doing this organization exist, have a legal existence. So you are regulated DAO. So it's a DAO incorporated under the law of a state, qualified as company under the law, and linked to a state. And you are Maverick DAO and certain legal qualification, intrinsically international and established outside the law. So regulate or not regulate, the ambition of COALA Group is to find the most appropriate way for the specificity of this smart contract of governance. So you are a group of experts, and the way is to give a comprehensive non-binding law regime, such as uncitral or unidroit to ensure harmonized law. Yes. Okay, so it's a flexible legal framework bespoke to the particular characteristic and needs of DAO while providing a degree of legal certainty to DAO participants or other entities that interact with the DAO. Yes. Okay, the main point of attention in the COALA model law on Maverick DAO, the central concept of functional and regulatory equivalence. The model law defines the concept of DAO, establish rules of governance for DAO, establish a legal personality and limited liability, and introduce a dispute resolution mechanism and a tax treatment. Okay, so the central concept of functional regulatory, functional and regulatory equivalence, these concepts are central to the model law. The idea is to identify situation in which the technology allows legal requirement to be met without strictly complying with the letter of the law. The remedy is to allow states that use the model law to modernize their law considerably without being forced to make far-reaching legal reform. So it's equivalent, it's comparable effect. It's like functional equivalence. It demonstrates that this objective or purpose can be achieved by both the legal requirement and the technological solution. For example, electronic signature, be its technical characteristic, allow to identify the author of a document and to certify his agreement with the content in the same way as with the handwritten signature. So the both solutions are functionally equivalent with the consequence of not having the modification of the law. So in technology blockchain and the state registered, it occurs when the requirement of a legal standard have become obsolete because the introduction of the technological solution indirectly achieve the normative goal. Then demonstrate that this goal, DAO being registered in blockchain, so its registration in the company register will be redundant. Indeed, registration in the company register, such as name of founder, its company name, a state register, will be redundant as a blockchain. So two, it's the scope of the model law on DAO. It's a legal personality to act. So the COALA model propose a legal personality. If you do adhesion with model law and DAO, you are a legal personality. So on the statute, so the model law defines DAO as a legal entity whose purpose which may may be commercial, mutual, social, environmental, or political, may be specified in its statute. And the term statute of DAO refers to the rules defining the interaction of the member, including governance and decision-making procedure, allowing for a multiplicity of actors. And the roles are programmed in the smart contract. So DAO is defined as a set of smart contracts. So the condition for obtaining legal personality, it's registered on a public blockchain, provide a public address, a graphical user interface, be transparent to member, open source code, and a mechanics to contact the DAO, and a dispute resolution mechanism. So the dispute resolution mechanism means on-chain dispute resolution, and it's a mechanism for resolving dispute that is integrated. So the dispute resolution mechanism has a condition for legal personality. So the model law contains an obligation to refer to or provide a dispute resolution mechanism. Dispute resolution mechanism is defined as an on-chain alternative dispute resolution system, such as arbitration, expert determination, or on-chain alternative court system, which enables anyone to resolve their dispute, controversies, or claim with arising out of. So it's on-chain or off-chain, inclusion of a dispute resolution clause in the DAO code. But what is goes if the dispute goes off-chain? If the enforcement of the award is refused. Yes. And it's arbitration award. What are the legs arbitrati? So a lot of questions. The seat of the location selected by the party, must selected by the party as a legal place of arbitration, which constantly determines the procedural framework of the arbitration. But if you are no seat, if you are no, so the crucial point is do not have to meet minimum standard of due process. And it's essential to inform third party of the DAO adherence to a dispute resolution process by asking them to renounce to a traditional off-chain process. So the question of the dispute settlement mechanism, can the off-chain dispute arising from this dispute resolution mechanism be considered as an arbitration award within the meaning of the New York Convention? Are state courts today able of settling dispute with the DAO, and are they trained for this? It is in the sense that new dispute resolution specific services are being created to be able to respond to the demand of those certain arbitration centers, such as CMAP, in which we work for the dedicated service. So DAO model law is limited liability company. And you have an article about the provision specific to DAO for the fork, for example, or for the specific provisions that we are not found in traditional form. So tax, DAO is not a taxable subject because its transparency regime and taxable item are justified because it is impossible to attach a DAO to a state. All these revenues are attributed fiscally to its members. So briefly, the shortcoming on outlook. So this model of harmonization relies on the adoption of the model law by a large number of the states without which the uniformity of the law on legal certainty will not be achieved. The question of legal personality, why did the drafter not use the principle of functional and regulatory equivalence to address the issue of legal personality? This is a respect the privilege granted to state to confer legal personality. The legal personality depends of the state. And why did the drafter not use the principle of functional and regulatory equivalence to address the issue of legal personality? You can see the company and the DAO and its equivalence. So the question, it's a risk of fragmentation because the model law has not used the method of functional or regulatory equivalence to draw the consequence of legal personality without this accreditation criterion. And yet, this accreditation criterion risks fragmenting and distancing the model law from its primary goal of being a common framework usable by all maverick DAO. So DAO model attached to a state or each state that adopts the model law merely recognize the legal existence of DAO. Need for state accreditation, it all depends of the state. So it's a risk of fragmentation if governed by several laws and no objective criterion of state affiliation and uncertain legal regime between private, international, and substantive law. So the solution is election of the model law by the DAO, include the choice of model law in the smart contract. This would avoid leaving this choice to the state and having to integrate a new form of company into their national law, DAO, International Digital Company. So use of the regulatory and functional equivalence method in private international law. So the code will become the law, but you can inject law in the code, and any DAO validly incorporated under its code will be recognized as a foreign company, increased confidence in blockchain technology, as only the code will govern its structure and nature, and that is the freedom of contract and fusion with technology. So maybe we can do a parallel, the parallel can be drawn with trust. I think that the current constitution of DAO is very similar to a trust. Yeah. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Goodness me, we have questions in the chat. Thank you very much, Sabine, for your very interesting critique of the COALA model law. It is there's a lot there. There is a lot there that and it's not very well known either. I mean, it's not very well disseminated. I think it would be quite interesting to have a wider spectrum. Now, before we go to the questions that I have to ask of my panel, I do want to ask Andre to come on if he can, because Andre Cardozo is a partner at Justin Pereira in Brazil, and he's very focused on the governance of blockchain. He has worked and done quite a lot of thinking and events around the topic, in which he shares an interest with Primavera de Filippi, and he's about to publish, or maybe now it's been published, you can tell me, Andre, a paper about whether DAOs are a means in the assistance of the governance of blockchain, which is a huge topic. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes perhaps to bounce back on what our speakers have been telling us about DAOs and whether that chimes in with what you were thinking when you wrote your paper. Please, Andre.
Hello, thank you. Thank you very much, Sophie. Thank you, and congratulations to all the panelists. I'm an attorney, very lucky to have very smart friends to share good ideas with me. So thank you for our presentation and topics. And all the panelists traced an idea to try to bring DAOs to the legal system. But we can go in reverse to DAOs could be a governance structure and a governance tool, very important. And it's very important because as Sabine and Federico mentioned, they are governed by a smart contract. So we can use DAOs as catalysts of governance, law, and also corporate governance. So it's possible to use DAOs as new tools for governance, to compose different kinds of governance, and also to bring new governance structures that are based not only on voting, and Federico mentioned this, the problem of specific token voters and the dilemma of having one person, one vote, one person, one token, and so on. There are different forms of distributing tokens, even defining specific kinds of tokens, like purpose-driven tokens, like the paper by Vitalik and others on the Sobal token, that we can aggregate another characteristics to tokens that are not only referred to buying or obtaining tokens for something. So it's very interesting to have this discussion to try to bring DAOs to the legal system, but also DAOs could bring a lot of novelties, a lot of revolution in the even the thinking of governance in especially when we see Web3 applications, DeFi applications, and digital applications. So this is very important. I think this would be a very interesting topic for study, and we can go all the day discussing this. But I know we have a lot of questions for the panelists, so I will limit my intervention to this, and I'm very glad to be with all of you, all the people in the conference. Thank you,
Andre. Thank you so much. I think the question of governance and the role of DAOs in governance, especially in light of Vitalik's paper, is a very important one, and something on which a blog post or two should be written. And I'm inviting people to raise their hand if they want to do that on ArbTech. We welcome those views. So I'm going to ask first. Yes, Milad, I saw your question in the chat. Just before I come to you, I'm going to ask our panelists if they want to react to what Andre had to say. Anyone, Fede, Sabine, Millie,
Yeah.
Please.
Yes, I think that it's very interesting to have a new model, a new maybe hybrid model, mixed. You can implement like wiring LLC, but it's very, you know, it's a lot of possibility, mixed possibility, and I think the DAO, the model DAO, can be able to give a new way, a Web3 way to governance. Yeah.
I mean, Fede, do you want to comment on this? I just wanted to bring in the perhaps the little chime that DAOs are great, but they are decentralized, and therefore we're going back again to the question, is decentralization workable? Do we not need, because there is a lot of scholarship on whether DAOs are really a place for internal strife and argument because there is no leader. Do you have a view on that at all?
I mean, I think that it's important to understand that DAOs are not for everything. So DAOs are typically a good structure for like what in the crypto ecosystem we call like credibility neutrality. I mean, when you need this software or this network to, I mean, not being subject to arbitrary changes by one actor, that's where you may want to have a DAO with inclusive governance and lots of people involved. Because what happened in the Web2 world is that, for example, there was Twitter, and they opened their API for companies to build on top of their technology and their network. And then one day they just, because of business considerations and optimization of profit, they just decided to close that. So all of the rest of the people who had already built their businesses, assuming that they would have access to the Twitter network, I mean, they just were, I mean, basically destroyed from one day to the other, right? So what we want DAOs in situations where we don't want anyone to have the arbitrary possibility to make a decision that would destroy an ecosystem because of their whim or because of considerations that are right. So it's a situation where you don't want a monopoly to happen in something that is very important. That's where DAOs are better. Then you don't need DAOs everywhere. I mean, and actually DAOs have lots of challenges that you don't have to deal with if you are building a centralized traditional company.
Mila, anything? Sorry, Millie, anything on this?
As well. Well, actually, I think it's a very interesting subject on the fact that I do believe that DAOs as fully decentralized or properly decentralized work in the sense of caring about a community that can work with the governance where you don't have a centralized administration, but also to notice how hard and gray is the concept of decentralization itself, as we see it as a gradient and not actually as a goal of fully 100% achieving. It was in 2019 that the SEC itself actually created a report right after what happened with the DAO, a framework for investment contracts in virtual assets that talks about sufficient decentralization, not decentralization itself. And it was no longer ago that, sadly, I don't remember the source of the report that I read, that from a scale of 1 to 10, only 0.8 of the DAOs that existed actively in the ecosystem are actually decentralized. Right. So it's also hard and important for members and founders to think of a correct roadmap, because every decentralized protocol once started centralized. It needed for founders and how to actually properly have a good roadmap and a deployment for it to happen in a way that you are truly being what you're calling yourself that you are, or that you are informing how you're going to eventually get there. So as Federico said, you are having a decentralized autonomous organization because it's actually helpful to the purpose of what you're trying to achieve.
I mean, the great thing about this is, from what I'm hearing, is that you need to have something that fits your purpose, as opposed to have a template that's really hard and is inflexible. We have a question for Millie in the chat from Milad Mohammadi. Milad, are you able to tell us your question? Because I could read it, but it's not as interesting as having you say it, please.
Sure. Yeah, I'm basically looking into starting a product. It would be something like if you think of Axie Infinity, maybe you may or may not be familiar with this project, but it's a gaming company that has a Web3 product with a token. And I'm wondering, when does it make business sense to be a DAO, and whether it makes business sense to be running as a centralized company, and the token just is incentive for users and things like this. I haven't seen a great framework on this yet. I've seen lots of legal wrapper frameworks on when it legally makes sense to be, wrapping DAOs and such, but I haven't seen when it makes sense to go from a traditional company to running a DAO. So.
Well, thank you so much, Milad, for your question. I think that partly it was mentioned from the little parts of each panelist of how it can be interpreted or analyzed. In a part, for example, what said Federico, to understand to what extent you want to avoid having a centralized party make decision on top of the others, but as well on how much you actually care in your community. Because by granting your community the possibility of making decisions of where the roadmap of the DAO is going to be, you're intrinsically also working with the incentives of them to actually want to collaborate and make part of it and make it grow. So you're using economic or token incentives for them to say, this is a community for us to keep going. But at the same time, it also requires a deep analysis of the business model, and also an interesting point of view of the same framework that I mentioned on the fact that by achieving this sufficient decentralization, is this that is preliminarily considered by the SEC, and by the SEC, I mean like the Securities Exchange Commission, as an example of what other regulatory entities and financial entities might think, that this kind of regulations on financial instruments is actually the fact of the business model. Its regulations there wouldn't be a necessity of the enforceability or application for them, or even the possibility for it to happen. So on when it would actually help to have a DAO is a little bit like asking yourself when actually blockchain technology would be or would help for the business model that I want to utilize. So considering governance, considering as well community and how much you want yourself to interact, and to what extent the taxonomy or the intrinsic nature of your tokens matter to fully consider going completely decentralized with intelligent roadmap as well as deployment. Because sometimes being considered a security for a token comes to the way that it was actually launched and deployed beyond of the fact of what it was considered to be in a moment in time.
I see. Yeah, great. Thank you for that. Very detailed.
Very fast.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We have a question from Walid Bishuti to Federico regarding proof of humanity. Walid, are you still online? If you are,
I am.
Yes, can you ask your question directly to Fede?
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. First of all, thank you, everyone, for these presentations. Federico, I have a question regarding proof of humanity as a concept. How do you verify the identity of the humans, let's say, in this concept? Like, do you require copies of national IDs, electronic signatures, technical checks such as IP addresses or MAC addresses, any other checks that you might be doing? Because, you know, with issues of deep fake, it's very easy these days to create fake identities and have computers basically or artificial intelligence creating fake identities. So how do you think this concept would overcome this problem? Thank you.
Yeah, good question. Let me share my screen so you can see. Can you see the screen?
Yeah.
So we solve this problem like as everything we do at Kleros with economic incentives. So this is how the list works. So Alice wants her profile to be included into the list, so she makes a submission of into proof of humanity, and she makes a deposit in cryptocurrency. That this deposit will work as a bounty for community members to check on her profile. So when you make your submission, you need to send a photo. You see this is Vitalik's submission. On top of the left, a photo looking at the camera, and you have to send also a video saying I certify that I am a real human. And in here you can see so this is Vitalik's video. And so, and then can you see that there is a Ethereum address on the bottom that he's showing at the camera. So the goal of this video is not having, deep fakes, being done. So at the moment, it's not easy for a deep fake to like, it's quite expensive to do a deep fake that is convincing enough, and it's not worth it to be on this registry. In the future, that's going to be a problem. So after people make this submission, so they need to get a vouch from any other person from the registry. And then after they get this vouch, people can verify if this submission complies with the rules to be accepted. What does this mean? That is the photo in the right, orientation? Is the lighting correct? Is the video okay? Also a number of rules. And then if the submission is accepted, then the submitter receives the deposit back and she's into the list. Let's say now she wants to, make a new submission with a duplicate profile. And so she put some makeup and, she changes, her dress. And so she gets a vouch, and maybe someone thinks that, hey, this is a duplicate profile. So they can challenge this submission with another deposit. And then there's going to be a Kleros trial that is going to see if this is actually a duplicate or not. And then if this woman loses the trial, then the deposit goes to the challenger. So proof of humanity doesn't require people to say what the real identity is. This is not a KYC tool where you have to show your passport. And the only goal here is that people will make the video and the photo in order to make sure that they are not duplicate, because if you are a duplicate, then you can get more votes on the DAO, or you can get, if you use this registry to distribute some UBI, token, you will get more UBI than you should. So this is a pseudonymous registry, and so it doesn't use any ID or anything. Just make sure that this address of Ethereum is not duplicated, and there's not one person more than once in the registry. That's the whole goal. In the future, other people can build on top of this and try to add, ID, passports or whatever, but this is not like the goal that we are pursuing at this moment.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. It makes it a bit difficult for twins, maybe identical twins.
We researched that. How do you recognize the difference between twins? The ear is different. We research this, and there is people who are experts can see the differences. But yeah, that's a great question.
Thank you.
Fede, thank you for doing that. And we've already gone 15 minutes past the hour, so we might as well carry on for another 15 minutes if that's okay with everyone. I just wanted to, and I see that there's a lot of information and going on in the chat and the conversation, which is fantastic. Mihala, you had two questions, I think, and I'm going to ask you please to put them to the panel so that we can finish with that.
Sure. So one question is about the applicability of DAO model of governance to international arbitration work in solving disputes in general, if there's any applicability. And the second question was about liability. Who should be liable in case there's something going wrong with the DAO, there's a fraud or a cyber attack? And I know this has been addressed already by the US court, so I'm looking forward to hear from the panel.
Thank you. Can you be more specific, Mihala? In international arbitration, where do you see the DAOs applying particularly?
I'm just thinking if can have the model as Kleros has to solve disputes via DAO, so the community decides who's supposed to win. This is the only idea that I have at the moment. I'm not sure if there's anything else, but maybe the panelists have other ideas.
I mean, Kleros is not a DAO, is it, Fede?
No,
Just
no.
to be
It's a
clear.
DAO. Actually, Kleros is
It is a DAO. All right.
Yeah. Yeah, and also addressing the previous concern, I mean, why it makes sense for Kleros to be a DAO? Because this is going to handle really highly sensitive situations of disputes, and you really want Kleros to be credibly neutral. You know, you want it to follow what we know in the analog world, rule of law. I mean, that there is no Federico that can, tamper with the jury selection or the evidence. So that's why, I mean, we need Kleros to be a DAO, and there wouldn't be another convincing way of building Kleros, right? So
that means, if ever the COALA law comes into acceptance, does that mean that you would register to be a DAO under it?
I mean, we have the legal team, we would have to make that suggestion. I mean,
everything's possible,
as I always,
right?
It depends, Sophie,
Don't answer to me like you can't give me my line back. But more interestingly, I mean, is that an attractive proposition? I think I would say, if COALA becomes something that is adopted by states in the way that the COALA membership wants it to, would that be an attractive proposition for your community?
I think it would. I mean, we even in the past had people threatening, us to sue everyone in the Kleros DAO as a partnership in the US because of it's really unclear, what a DAO is, and people made arguments that they could sue everyone in the DAO as liable for a general partnership in the US, for example. I mean, definitely we need, some framework that protects every member of the DAO and at least make them, know what liabilities they are facing with their participation. So it's really unclear everything, and so definitely if this COALA model is helpful for giving people more certainty about what participation entails, that's definitely something we are interested in.
Excellent. So I have someone reminding me on the chat that we missed a question from Gilberto. Gilberto, I know some people replied to you on the chat, but I also know you are still on the call. So if there is a question we can help you with, please tell us what it is. Gilberto, are you? Yes.
Hi.
Please. Hi. Good evening. Good day.
Good evening. I want to do a question to Mili about DAOs and fideicomiso, because I can read some papers about DAOs and trust, but practically doesn't exist paper related DAOs and fideicomiso. What is your opinion that fideicomiso, like structure of fiscal crypto patrimonial planification?
Well, actually,
Mili, I'm sorry to interrupt. Can you just explain what Gilberto means for the wider community, what fideicomiso means in terms of the question? Thank you.
Fideicomiso of LATAM, not trust of English structure. LATAM structure. Do you understand, Mili?
Yeah, I understand. And first of all, it's also true that I've seen mostly papers or reports on trust being used for legal wrappers for different issues or reasons for DAOs, but not fideicomisos. And to make actually the difference between a trust and fideicomisos they're very similar, but the main difference is that the fideicomiso would be the Latin cousin of a trust. Basically, that's the difference. And each country in the world has different ways of regulating their own trusts and fideicomisos, mostly in Latin America, with small things that actually varies between them. There are countries in the world where trusts or fideicomisos are considered an entity, and there are countries in the world where fideicomisos or trusts are actually considered a contract. And it's true that most of the information or the use cases that we can mention regarding trusts, not fideicomisos, being used for legal wrappers or DAOs are mentioned for the Channel Islands in Guernsey or Jersey, where the trust itself, it's a contract. Or we can also talk about foundation companies in Cayman Islands, where actually these are not trusts. They are very similar, though, with the difference that they are considered a legal entity. But the interesting part to mention actually is the fact that fideicomisos, being so similar to trusts, could also be considered good ideas in Latin America as DAO legal wrappers, on the fact that they would be considered a contract, special kind of patrimony affected to a specific purpose that has to be enforced by a trustee, but can still have supervisor that forces or makes sure that trustee does whatever the token holders would do. So truth be told, understanding that trust could be adapted to the legal wrapper and necessities of DAOs, it's also true that fideicomisos could be interestingly used in Latin America for the matter, as well as an example in Argentina, it could potentially work out, as well as the fact of considering having an Argentina civil association for DAOs, for legal wrapper in case they want to from then utilize for the governance of the protocol, for example. So
thank you very much. Thank you very much, Millie, for giving that that answer. I think we are way over our time, but that does mean how interesting this topic is. Before handing to Ellie for the closing remarks, I just wanted to say a huge thank you to our panel and to all of you here for showing an interest and being completely enthusiastic about this topic. And we'll see you next time. Ellie, you will tell us that the recording will be available and where people can find it, and direct everyone to our website.
Exactly. Not much to add on my end. Thank you everyone for attending. Thank you so much to our speakers. It was amazing. I've learned so much, and I'm sure that I'm speaking for the audience as well. Thank you so much for spending your time with us tonight. The recording will be made available. Follow us on LinkedIn to be informed, or have a look at our website. And we have more webinars coming soon. I think the next one will be with Mihaela on crypto disputes updates. So it's going to be an amazing topic as well. And we hope to see many of you there. And again, thank you, everyone. Have a great evening and see you all very soon. Bye.
Thank you very much.
And it was a pleasure.
Thank you.